Thank you. Thank you for being here. Man, I love Velocity. Taking care of students and student ministry is an honor and a great responsibility. I started in Velocity when I was 20 years old. I was literally a basically teenager myself. I cannot believe they let me in. I'm sure a lot of you think the same thing, but towards over the last few years, the spiritual warfare in student ministry has been more intense than it ever was when I first started. And you guys are all dealing with the same things with students: anxiety, depression, suicide. All those things that Chocolate Bear talked about are more prevalent than they ever have been. So we have a heavy weight and a huge responsibility to steward these students and their families well. And if you know anything about me personally, then you think it's funny that they gave me this job because I'm like the rule follower. So, but I really believe that doing the things in this packet not only protects our students, but it protects us. And that it's our job, that we owe this to students and families who put them in our care. We owe this to them to really lean in to what this packet says and agree to follow it. So I know that I don't have a lot of time, and a lot of this stuff is real practical that we're just gonna kind of highlight through. So I wanna give 3 bullet points that kind of filter everything that we're ultimately gonna go over in this packet. Also, I just love bullet points. Nothing spiritual about this because I made it up myself, and it's literally the ABCs of safety policies, okay? So the first one, A, is it's dealing with inward. So how are we making sure with ourselves that we are championing these safety policies? A stands for above reproach. Let's be above reproach. So are you guys familiar with the recent Matt Chandler scandal that went on several months ago? So he came out to his church one Sunday and basically announced that he was being put on administrative leave because what had happened was a woman came to him in the lobby one day in between their services, and she said, "Hey, I don't like the way that you're talking to my friend on Instagram." And he's like, "Well, what are you talking about?" She says, "I have a friend. I know that you're messaging her on Instagram. It's inappropriate." So Matt immediately went to his boss, like the lead pastor, executive pastor, and said, "Hey, this just happened in the lobby. I'm letting you know." So they instantly start an investigation. What ended up happening was they did find that he was messaging with a woman on Instagram, and they had never had any kind of inappropriate relationship. There was no affair, nothing like that. But what they determined, and the words that they used, were the frequency and familiarity of the conversations they were having in the DMs was inappropriate. Matt Chandler's married. He's a pastor at the church. But the frequency and the familiarity, anyone that has Instagram knows that you can swipe up and respond to a story, you can private message each other, and it seems really not like a big deal. But what their investigation determined, that with him being a husband and a pastor, and this woman not being his wife, that it was an inappropriate relationship. So here Matt Chandler was telling his congregation, I'm admitting to this inappropriate conversation, and he took however many months of leave because of that. But what I'm trying to say here is that we have to be constantly above reproach. Who has a good definition for what that means? Don't be an idiot? Okay, sure. What else? What does it mean to be above reproach?
Don't do anything in the dark.
Yeah.
Where there are no witnesses.
Yeah. Nothing in the dark, no witnesses. Did you want to add? That's right. So being above reproach means that no one can look at you and point something out that could be determined as wrong. So I know that's hard because we don't want to be constantly thinking like, wait, let me walk on eggshells and make sure that I do absolutely nothing to offend or whatever. But it's not so much about that. It's about just making sure that you're living, uh, you know, holy, righteous, and right standing, so that nothing can be accused against you. The B is for our relationships with others, how we can keep the safety policies with others. B, over cautious. So always think uh, of how you can make a situation more safe. I'm going to have a hangout with my small group. How can I make that as safe as possible? I'm going to have a one-on-one with a student. How can I make that as safe as possible? Be overcautious. And C is for the best way that we can keep safety policies to protect us as a ministry, and that is to communicate everything. Communicate everything. Even if you don't think it's worth communicating, communicate it. Because if a student tells you that they have a bully at school who says as soon as they catch them alone, they're going to fight them, but then you just think, oh, okay, well, nothing has happened, so, I'll just let it be. And then something ends up happening. What if the parent comes to us and says, hey, my student told me that they told you about this bully, and why don't I know? Then you're going to say, I'm sorry, I should have. So communicate everything. Communicate to who? Communicate to parents. Communicate to your iron group leader, to your velocity staff. Just communicate. Also, more practically, when you're having events or hangouts with your students, communicate that too. I remember one time there was a parent who was like emailing us, messaging us saying, hey, I need more information. My student was invited to a pumpkin party this weekend. I don't know anything about it, give me more information. And we actually didn't know what was happening either. The small group had planned a Halloween party and we didn't know about it. So when the parent came to us and said this, it looked like we didn't know. I'm tapping this mic, I'm sorry. It looked like we didn't know about the event. So then it looked like things were hidden. So does that make sense? Like if we know, if everything's communicated all the time, then it helps. Sarah? It was Sarah, but she's still an amazing leader. She's still an amazing leader. Yes. So, but the whole point is, if a parent comes to us and we look silly, not knowing what's happening, then that communicates to them that we aren't aware of what's going on in the ministry. And so just communicate everything. You can never be too safe. So we're going to go through the packet, and I'm just going to highlight. All of you guys are going to have this physical copy, and honestly, it would be best if you do read through this in its entirety. And if you consult this, maybe even before consulting somebody, because probably a lot of answers to your questions are in here, but we are going to highlight some of the most important things to emphasize. So it lists in there the screening process of how we hire and even how we recruit volunteers. It lists that all of us are background checked, and as you guys know, before you were even able to shadow in Velocity, that you were background checked. It talks about consequences of violation. So this is on us as an organization. If we're relaxed in our recruitment process and our training process, then that ultimately falls on us. So that's why we're here doing this. And that's why maybe there was some barriers before you could even start shadowing. It's not because we were, lazy with that, but it's because we want to be thorough. And over on page 5, it talks about reporting abuse or suspicions of abuse. So Choco Bear talked about this a lot. I don't want to nail it down too much, but this is really important for you guys to know that we do have a zero tolerance policy that prohibits any act of sexual, emotional, or physical abuse. This requires all Gateway Fellowship Church employees and volunteer leaders, you guys, to immediately report any occurrence or suspected occurrence of child abuse to a member of our staff. So basically the way that it works is if you see abuse or suspect it, you need to go to us, and we have the responsibility to then report it to law enforcement. The CPS emergency hotline is right there. Now, I will say, depending on the situation and depending on the age of the person, there's different things where, like, you might have to direct the call, and we're there to help with, details or whatever, or maybe we have to handle it. There's, different situations, and it'll be taken care of in the right way. But that number is there for you guys to know. No permission is needed from Gateway Fellowship Church before reporting to law enforcement personnel. In addition, the report may be made without informing a Gateway Fellowship personnel. So this is to protect you guys. If y'all think that, the staff isn't treating something seriously, which I hope that, that thought never happens, but, we all have a responsibility here for reporting child abuse. Next is, let's talk about, so I think, throughout the campuses, you're gonna have different building safety policies. So that's probably something that if you have more specific questions about, you can talk to your Iron Group leader or your pastor. But the next thing that we wanna highlight is the 2-to-1 ratio. So this one is really important, and it's the one that I pound all the time, because when it comes to something that a student says against an adult, 90% of the time the student's voice is going to be heard. So we want to be above reproach, extra cautious, that we're constantly having a 2-to-1 ratio. What does that mean? That means that you should always have at least 2 students to 1 leader, adult, or 2 leaders to 1 student. Now, many of you are here serving with your spouse or with a sibling. There is an exception to that rule. Chili and Sarah are not allowed to pick up 1 student in their car because they are a married couple. If you go to court and it's Chili and Sarah against 1 student, that's not going to look very good with a married couple. So remember, two adults that aren't in relationship and 1 student or 2 students. To me, be overcautious. Remember that second B. I would say always have more than 1 student around, always. I do understand that there are times where you need to have one-on-one conversations with students, but I think that can be done in a public space where people can see you and still have that same effect of the privacy and just letting them, have the emotion there. I think we're going to do questions in just a minute. But always just be overcautious. And so this is another thing with outside events. Don't hear this as in you can't ever hang out with students one-on-one. You can go meet a student at a coffee shop and it's just 1 student, but that's because you're in public. People can see you. Now, like I said, I try to be overcautious and always have at least 2, but if you need to have a one-on-one time, and remember, you can't be in the car with them, so that student needs to figure out a way to get to the restaurant or the coffee shop on their own while you meet them there. So this is probably one of the rules that just constantly has, are you sure maybe in this case there's an exception? But no, we just cannot make the exception of giving a student a ride to Velocity or on the weekend, whatever. The more, you have to understand, the more we grow, the closer we are from making 1 mistake that lands this church on the headline. And that's not even what I really care about, is getting Gateway on the headline. It's more about protecting students and protecting our ministry. So that's the 2-to-1 rule. Again, I know I'm flying through a lot of this, but you can read more details in the packet. Volunteer policies on page 9. So this is things that are expected of you, and I hope that when you were recruited here and met with a staff member that they sort of told you some of these things. Some of these things also as a Christian are just expected of you, and then some may be a little bit more gray area that you don't know. So tobacco use, there's no tobacco use allowed here in our church facilities or in any of our events on campus or away from campus. Intoxicants, staff members and volunteers are prohibited from the use, possession, or being under the influence of alcohol or any illegal drug while in any church facility, while driving with students, or while working with or supervising minors during any Gateway Fellowship Church program or activity. This should be very obvious, but it's something that has to be said. This is not a rule of whether drinking is a sin or not. It's a rule of you have to be able to separate your position here in student ministry from your personal life and understand that we are working with minors, and honestly, be overcautious, be above reproach. Alcohol should never be included in anything that you have to do with velocity. Nudity, never be nude in the presence of students in ministry programs. This is why we have rules at camp where students have their own bathrooms and leaders have their own bathrooms. We even say don't let them walk around in towels. So again, I know that there are times where you're just really, really close with students and they're goofy and boys are weird when it comes to this kind of stuff, but you just have to be overcautious. Be above reproach. It's always better to just operate on the safe side. Physical appearance. So we really, it really matters that you guys dress in appropriate attire so that we can be an example to students. We hear this all the time, and it's true. What we do in moderation, they will do in excess. So if they see us posting videos of us working out in a sports bra or with no shirt on in the gym, then they're going to say, oh, okay, they do that, and they're comfortable posting that online for people to see. So when I come up here in my little half shirt with my belly button, there's no problem with that because they show that online. So surely I'm okay with showing it in person. Again, the style these days is different than when I started in ministry. It's tiptoeing the line of immodesty being the new style, the new trend. Half shirts, short shorts, So we have to set the tone. We have to show these students that we can be beautiful and handsome and buff and what?
Trendy.
And trendy and still completely, yeah, Stanley Cup, still be completely modest. So what we do in moderation, they will do in excess. In moderation, let's be above reproach. And in excess, let's be above reproach. I already talked about the 2-adult rule. Let's wrap it up here. Electronic communication on page 13. So just some things to highlight here on that page. Prudent judgment must be used in the timing and content of text. Do not text before 7 a.m. or after 10 p.m. unless the texting occurs as a part of a program ministry activity. Do not share photos or videos of sexual or suggestive nature. All communication a leader participates in is subject to inspection. So what to know and highlight about this? I remember when I started with my 10th grade girls, they would text me in all caps at all hours of the day and night about everything. And what I had to remember was that, and again, we can bring the Matt Chandler thing into this. Think about the familiarity and the frequency of your conversations with them. There is nothing wrong with Chocolate Bear talking to an accelerate student, but then you start to think about the familiarity, the frequency of that. Same with any opposite sex leaders. There may be a student in Sarah's group that Chili, is comfortable with and talks to, but if he can't show receipts of the conversations that he's having, then that's when it becomes inappropriate. So that's why we say, of course, no Snapchatting. You should limit the DMs on Instagram and Facebook or whatever, texting. So it's good to be overcautious and not be texting opposite gender or same gender late at night. They should be asleep anyways, right, students going to school the next morning? Yeah, yeah. But these are things that should be kind of obvious, but we do need to say them and we need to highlight them. Avoid social media or texting communication may occur with a student of the opposite gender. Any exceptions must be approved by student ministry staff. So again, this goes under the C, communicate everything. If you need to be talking to somebody of the opposite gender in some kind of social media way like that, then you should just have your iron group leader or somebody know, hey, I frequently talk to this person because of this reason. And you need to also be always able to show what you're talking about. If you see a phone call log that's like 40-minute phone calls every Monday night, it's a little sketchy, right? A little sus. Okay. So 2 more things. Transportation. Again, this goes under the 2-to-1 rule. I would just avoid transportation issues at all costs. These kids have cars, these kids have parents that get them places anyways, so just put it on them to meet you everywhere. Or better yet, go to them, go to their house. As a parent, even of a toddler, I would say, like, most parents, I feel, would rather have their kids stay in their home and have their friends come over because they can see kind of what's going on and, manage the whatever's happening in their own home. So do that. Feel free to insert yourself in their lives and go to them, but avoid all transportation at all costs if you can. If you can't, remember the 2-to-1 rule, and you can read more details there, but just practice safe driving and don't be an idiot, as Chili said. Out of velocity events, interactions, same thing. Never spend the night at a student's home or invite them to spend the night at your home. On this, I want to just touch on the Chi Alpha issue really quick. So probably here more at the Northwest campus, we deal with, if you're a leader of a junior or a senior student, you're probably starting to see that your students are getting involved with Chi Alpha. Now, this gets tricky because Chi Alpha does not have these necessarily because they are not dealing with minors. They are dealing with adults. They can have sleepovers. They can go on weekend and overnight events and not need to worry about the minor and adult interaction, but we still do. And they need to for our minors. So when you have students that are in your small group that are getting involved in Chi Alpha, I just recommend that if you have not already connected with their parent, please do that so that you can be communicating with them constantly about what's going on with their student so that they know that Velocity is not necessarily facilitating or hosting Chi Alpha events. And also warn your students against having those sleepovers. When my first small group, they started getting involved in Chi Alpha, it broke my heart because they were still mine for that one last year and they wanted to be in Chi Alpha. So they started meeting my friends in Chi Alpha. And I remember one time my roommate invited a girl that was in my small group to spend the night at our house, like with her in her room. But I was like, no, we can't do that. I'm a Velocity leader. They cannot be sleeping over. I know you're a Chi Alpha student, but that's, no. So I encourage you to connect with that student's small group leader in Chi Alpha and their small group and their parent. And then if you have any questions about any of that, you can always ask. One last thing before I wrap up, I just want to empower you guys to be, and Chuck Bear says this all the time, you are the pastors and you are the shepherds of your small group. He touched on this already, but I promise you that even in times where you think they'll hate you, they will actually respect you, even if it takes a while. I'm sharing one quick story before I leave. About 4 years ago, there were 3 girls in the bathroom vaping during or before service. I had the safety team member come up to me and said, Austyn, we got a tip that there were 3 girls in there vaping. We sent our lady team member in there, and as soon as she walked in there, they put something in their pocket, so we're pretty sure that's what they're in there doing. What do you want to do about it? We went into the service. The safety team leader showed me the 3 girls. We brought them out, and I said, and I don't know where you were. I think you were on, anyways. It was just me. I was the only one able to, and their small group leader also was here that night. So it was, but Sarah is one of the best leaders ever. So okay. Anyways, maybe you were on your honeymoon. I don't know.
No, the week before I was traumatized.
Okay, yeah. It was a hard group that year. Anyways, so I looked all 3 of these girls in the eye and I said, I know you are vaping and I know one of you has it in their pocket and we're not leaving this room until I have that in my hand. And we sat there for minutes and minutes, a long time. No one was breaking, no one was, and so I just kept telling them like, all right, next step, if you don't give it to me, is I'm calling parents. Okay, next step is this, next step is that. They weren't breaking. Finally, I don't know what it was that I said. No.
Darlene.
What?
Darlene said, I know what it looks like. Or something like that, right?
Okay, I don't remember, but I said it wrong. This is the thing that I said that got them to break. I said, all right, I'm going to call your parents right here and have you tell them what's happening. And at that moment, all of them started crying, and one of them, reached in her pocket and gave it to me. The sad thing was I did end up calling every parent, and they were all grandparents. All 3 of these girls were being raised by grandparents. And so here's the point of the story. Here's how all 3 of these girls ended up. One, that was her first time here. I've never seen her again. The second one, she's been troubled. She's been in and out. Sarah's been discipling her. We're still fighting for her. The other one had a breakthrough moment, broke down, repented of her sin. She was baptized last year, and she's now Miss Teen Texas and leading the FCA at her school and leading students. So what I'm trying to say here is if you guys don't take the initiative to do the hard things, I was shaking. I was literally like 22 telling these girls, I'm going to call your mom, you're vaping. Like, what I'm saying is feel empowered to follow these rules. And I promise you, they may hate you in that moment, but you can also have a Chanel Williams out of that. So do your thing. And I'm proud of you and love you guys.